Ladies and gentlemen, she is dangerous. She may look like a little girl. They may have said she's sweet little Carly, but unfortunately, we all know that that's not true.
She doesn't look like a killer. She looks like a kid who stole her dad's old band t-shirt. Oversized Nirvana shirt, bare feet, phone in hand, moving down a quiet hallway the way she's done 1,000 times before. But on this night, the hallway is different. On this night, a body is cooling on the floor behind her. The CCTV doesn't show the gun going off. It doesn't capture the last words, the last breath, the last look of confusion on a mother's face when she realizes the person pointing the weapon at her is her 14-year-old daughter. It shows the part after. It shows what kind of person you are when the screaming is over. This is Carly Madison Gregg. There's no chaos in the footage, no chairs knocked over, no broken lamps, no desperate attempt to crawl away, just stillness. The kind of stillness that only appears when something very loud has already happened. Carly steps into frame, and here's what should grab you by the throat. She does not run. She does not shake. She does not even look like she's trying to understand what just happened. Her shoulders are loose. Her breathing looks normal. She pauses at a doorway, not like someone in shock, but like someone making sure everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Except it isn't. Because out of frame, on that same floor Carly is walking on, lies the woman who carried her, fed her, argued with her, worried sick about her, her mother. According to investigators, she's just been shot in the head by her own daughter. Carly moves forward, and you can't help thinking, step around her. Don't step on her. Don't step over her. But the girl in the camera doesn't share that instinct. She crosses the hallway, and there's a moment where her foot lifts, where you know what she's walking past. And she doesn't break stride. No kneeling beside the body. No hand over her mouth. No Mum, wake up. Nothing. Just that same slow, measured walk. She drifts into the kitchen. She glances around the living room. She looks like she might be bored. If you muted the video and had no idea what came before it, you could mistake it for any teen drifting through the house late at night, hunting for snacks. But downstairs, or in the next room depending on which report you read, her mother is lying in a widening pool of blood, and the only person moving is the one person who allegedly put her there. Then the most chilling moment arrives. Carly takes out her phone. This is the fork in the road where you expect humanity to show up. This is where a normal 14-year-old realizes what she's done and collapses into panic. Hands shaking, heart racing, gasping for air, struggling to hit 911 through a flood of tears. Instead, her thumbs move calmly. Tap, tap, tap. Later, when detectives scroll through her messages, they will find the words she decided to send in the minutes after her mother was shot. They will read them out loud into interview recorders and courtroom microphones, and every time, they sound more unreal. The text says, "Es mayor que, come see a dead body." No context, no fear, no attempt to pretend it was an accident. Just 4 words, like she's inviting someone to come check out a new video game. Come see a new outfit. Come see something cool. Come see a dead body. Who was that for? A friend, someone she trusted, someone she thought might look at this horror and be curious instead of horrified. Your phone buzzes. You expect gossip, drama, maybe a joke. You see, Es mayor que, come see a dead body. And the name at the top of the screen is a 14-year-old girl. Carly puts the phone away. She doesn't fling it across the room. She doesn't clutch it like a lifeline. She tucks it away like business is handled. And according to investigators, her business in that house wasn't finished. Because there's another person in this story. Another adult. Another target. Her stepfather. Think about his perspective for a second. He believes home is the safe place. Maybe he's at work. Maybe he's on his way back. Maybe he's in another room, scrolling on his own phone, thinking the worst thing that could happen tonight is another argument with a moody teenager. He has no idea that the danger is not outside. It's not a shadow at the window. It's not someone trying to kick in the front door. The real danger is already inside. Barefoot, calm, wearing his t-shirt. According to what's been presented in this case, Carly wasn't just reacting, she was escalating. Prosecutors say she tried to ambush him. That what happened to her mother was not a lone explosion of rage, but the first move in something much darker. Her mother dead. A text, "Come see a dead body," and still room in her mind to allegedly take aim at the next person who loved her. At 14, no visible remorse on the footage, no sign she's haunted, even in those first minutes. No trace that she's hearing her mother's voice in her head, begging her to stop. Just a girl walking through a crime scene with the same casual energy she might use walking through a mall. We grow up being told the world is dangerous, but that home is different. Lock the doors. Watch out for bad people. Stay inside. You're safe here. But in this house, that rule collapses, because the person to fear isn't a stranger at the window. It's the child you tucked in at night. You've just heard the chilling opening to the case of Carly Madison Gregg. This is Crime Uncovered. And tonight, we are pulling back the curtain on a darkness few dare to speak about. The stories of 10 teen daughters who, according to evidence and testimony, committed acts of unimaginable violence against their own families. These are not easy stories. They are disturbing, they are heartbreaking, and they force us to confront the most terrifying question. What happens when the monster is not under the bed, but sleeping in the next room? Before we go any further, a crucial disclaimer. The details you are about to hear are drawn from extensive research into court documents, police reports, public records, and reputable news archives. Some of these cases have resulted in convictions, while others involve ongoing investigations or allegations that have not yet led to a final verdict. We will always distinguish between proven facts and alleged actions, treating all accusations as such. Our purpose is to present the facts as they are known, to honor the victims, and to explore the profound questions these cases raise. Now, before we dive deeper into Carly's story and the 9 others that follow, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Drop a comment below. Let me know you're here, ready to face these truths with us, because what you're about to witness is a journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche. We'll meet a Florida teen who, after an LSD trip in a Denny's, allegedly plotted her mother's murder with her boyfriend, believing it was the only way out of her life. A British girl who, at just 15, earned the horrifying title of the UK's youngest female double murderer, her crimes marked by a chilling lack of emotion. Twins who, in a brutal and bloody attack, turned on the woman who raised them, leaving a scene of unimaginable horror that shocked their entire community. A girl who, after allegedly killing her mother and stepfather, then went online, not to confess, but to contact true crime influencers, begging them to cover the very story she was at the center of. A daughter who, at 14, allegedly stabbed her mother 43 times, then buried her body in the backyard, a crime so savage it defied comprehension. And another who, after committing murder at a young age, almost managed to erase her past and attend an Ivy League university, until the truth of her actions resurfaced years later. These are just glimpses. Each case is a labyrinth of betrayal, manipulation, and cold-blooded violence. Each one will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, innocence, and the capacity for evil. You are watching the most evil teen daughters in history. They showed no remorse. And now, let's return to the beginning. Let's finish the story of Carly Madison Gregg. We've seen the aftermath. A mother on the floor, a daughter walking calmly through the house, a text message that reads, "Come see a dead body." But how do you get there? How does a 14-year-old reach the point where her own mother becomes a target? To understand that night, we have to step back. We have to look at who Carly was before that hallway ever turned into a crime scene. From the outside, nothing about her life screamed, "future killer." She wasn't some horror movie cliché. She was a kid. Pictures show a girl who could blend into any crowd at any school. Messy hair, band shirts, that awkward mix of child and almost adult you see in every teenager. She lived at home with her mother and stepfather. Like a lot of blended families, things weren't perfect, but on paper, it wasn't the kind of home you'd predict would end in gunfire. Neighbors saw what everyone always sees. A family coming and going. A girl who sometimes smiled, sometimes slammed doors. A mother who, like so many, was just trying to hold everything together. But behind those doors, tensions were building. There were arguments. There were rules Carly didn't like. There were boundaries she pushed against harder and harder. Maybe it started the way it starts in so many homes. Curfews, phone restrictions, fights over school, friends, boys, drugs, behavior. Little battles that stacked up into a quiet war. We don't have a recording of every word they ever said to each other. We only have fragments, comments from friends, statements to police, hints in messages, suggestions that Carly felt controlled, misunderstood, maybe even trapped. The difference is, most teens will yell, cry, threaten to run away. Carly didn't just want to run. According to investigators, she picked up a gun. On the night of the murder, there was no dramatic storm, no blackout, no horror movie soundtrack. It was just another night in a house that had seen a lot of arguments and a lot of second chances. At some point, Carly made a decision. She armed herself. She went to where her mother was. A woman who had tucked her in, attended her school events, worried about her future, all of that history condensed into one moment. We don't know if there were final words. We don't know if there was a last why or please don't. What we do know is what investigators found afterwards. A mother dead from a single shot to the head, no sign of a struggle, no evidence that this was an accident, and a daughter who did not run from the house in hysterics. A daughter who did not call for help. A daughter who instead texted a friend, "Come see a dead body." When police finally arrived and began piecing the night together, they weren't just disturbed by the violence, they were disturbed by what came after, by the apparent lack of panic. By the way, Carly moved through those first minutes as if something inside her had switched off, or worse, settled. According to reports, this is when they say she turned her attention to the next target, her stepfather. He was someone who had tried to be part of Carly's life. Someone who, whatever flaws he had, never expected the girl in the band shirt to become a threat. Investigators say Carly wasn't finished. They claim she waited for him, that she positioned herself to catch him when he came into the home, that this wasn't a chaotic, random second explosion, but a planned ambush. The full sequence of what happened when he arrived, how he survived, and what exactly stopped a second murder is locked in case files and testimony that would later shock everyone who heard it. But what matters most is this. When police finally took control of that house, it wasn't a mystery who they were looking at. They weren't hunting an intruder. They weren't searching for some stranger in the woods. They were looking at a 14-year-old girl, and they believed she had done all of this. They saw the text. They saw the footage. They saw the way she moved, the things she said, the things she didn't say. In court documents, in interviews, in statements from people who knew her, a picture begins to form. A teenager with deep anger, a teenager who may have felt cornered, a teenager whose resentment hardened into something deadly. But here is where opinions split. Some people look at Carly and say, she's a child. Something must have been wrong in that home. Something must have pushed her over the edge. Others look at the same facts and say, 14 or not, this is evil. This isn't a snap. This is cold. The law has its own way of drawing lines. Carly was arrested, charged, dragged out of the role of daughter and shoved into the role of defendant. In court, her age couldn't be ignored, but neither could her actions. The prosecutors argued this wasn't a tragic accident. It wasn't one mistake. It was a deliberate killing, followed by a chilling message and an alleged attempt to take another life. The defense tried to humanize her, to show the court that she was more than the worst thing she'd ever done. In the end, the system made its decision. Carly would not walk free. She would spend critical years of her youth under the control of the state, not her family. But here's the thing you can't sentence. You can put years on a prison term. You cannot put a number on what it does to a community to know that a mother died not at the hands of a stranger, but by the hands of her own child. You cannot measure what it does to the people who loved that woman, who trusted that daughter, who will never again hear a door slam or a teenage argument the same way. And you cannot escape the image of that hallway, the girl in the Nirvana shirt, the body on the floor, the message to a friend, "Es mayor que, come see a dead body." Was she a monster? Was she a broken child? Was she something in between? I want to hear what you think. After everything you've just heard about this case, what do you see when you look at Carly Madison Gregg, a teenager who was pushed and snapped, or someone who, even at 14, knew exactly what she was doing? Let me know in the comments. Because as dark as this story is, we are only at case 1. Next, we go to Florida, where a late-night hangout at a Denny's, LSD, and a boyfriend would help turn another teenage girl into something her own mother never saw coming. We leave Carly's hallway behind, but we don't leave betrayal. We don't leave daughters turning on mothers. We just move it to a different setting. This time, It starts under bright fluorescent lights, in a place meant for pancakes and late-night laughter. A Denny's in Florida. It's after midnight. Teenagers are slumped in a booth meant for 4 people, but somehow holding more bodies than chairs. The table is crowded, with empty glasses, half-eaten food, crumpled napkins, and LSD. Among them is a 15-year-old girl, Vanessa Robinson. She's there with her older boyfriend and a friend. They're high. They're giggling. They're talking too loud. The staff see another group of teens on a night out. What they don't see is that, in this booth, something is being born. Not a relationship, not a plan for college or a future or a life. A murder. Because as the LSD bends reality for these kids, the conversation takes a turn that will echo in courtrooms and headlines for years. Vanessa's mother, Vicky, is strict. She's trying to control her daughter. She doesn't approve of the boyfriend. She wants rules, curfews, boundaries. And at that booth, in that Denny's, on that night, a thought is spoken out loud that most kids, no matter how angry they are, never say. What if she was just gone? You can almost picture it. One of them jokes about wishing her dead. Someone else doesn't laugh. The idea hangs in the air a second too long. Under normal circumstances, that's where it would die. A stupid, angry, teenage fantasy. But tonight isn't normal. There are drugs in their system. There is an older boyfriend feeding the fire. And there is a vulnerable, conflicted girl desperate to hold on to the one person her mother hates. The conversation shifts from, "I wish she would disappear," to how she could disappear. In court later, this Denny's scene would become crucial. Who suggested killing Vicky? Who encouraged it? Who went along with it? And in the end, who did what? But down in that booth, those questions don't sound like legal arguments. They sound like 3 teens on acid, treating murder like a twisted puzzle they're trying to solve. Kill her. Get rid of her. Be free. From an outsider's table, it might look like kids discussing music, or parties, or some stupid drama from school. But at this table, they are discussing how to erase a mother. Vanessa is 15, old enough to know what death is, young enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, she can do something this extreme and somehow still get away with it. The LSD does something dangerous that night. It doesn't create the anger, but it loosens it. It unsticks the brakes. The boyfriend, older, is the one Vicky fears, the one she warns her daughter about, the one she sees, rightly or wrongly, as a threat. Now he's not just a threat to Vanessa's future, he's a threat to Vicky's life. By the time they leave that Denny's, the idea has been fed, shaped, and passed between them like a secret. The question is no longer if, it's how. Back at home, Vicky is not a villain. She's not perfect, but she's a mother trying to steer a daughter who is drifting into dangerous waters. She sets rules. She says no. She argues. In her mind, she's fighting for Vanessa's life. She has no idea that the real danger isn't just drugs, or older friends, or late nights. It's the conversation that happened in that booth. It's the way those kids looked at each other when someone said the words that can't be taken back. At some point, on some night after that Denny's conversation, the talk turns into action. The plan is simple and horrifying. Get Vicky alone. Overpower her. Make sure she can't stop them ever again. What happens next is brutal. Accounts differ in the details: who held her, who stabbed, who did what, but the outcome is the same. Vicky Robinson ends up dead. Her body does not lie peacefully in a bed, surrounded by family, leaving behind words of love and closure. It ends up stuffed into a trash can, dumped in the woods, like waste. Imagine for a moment the terror of those final moments. You're a mother. You raised this child. You fought with her, yes, but you also loved her in ways she never fully understood. And in your last moments, you realize that the hands on you, the force against you, the betrayal cutting into you, belongs in part to the same daughter you once rocked to sleep. You aren't dying because a stranger broke into your house. You aren't dying because you walked down the wrong street. You're dying because your child decided you were in the way. As soon as Vicky is gone, the fantasy of freedom doesn't feel clean or empowering. Reality starts to close in. There is blood. There is a missing person. There are questions. And there are 3 teenagers who now have to live with what they've done, or what they've taken part in, or what they failed to stop. They run. Of course they run. They pile into a car and take off, trying to outrun what happened in that house and in those woods. But you can't outrun a body. You can't outrun tire tracks, phone records, security cameras, witnesses, or the absence of a mother whose routine was known to neighbors and friends. Police start connecting the dots. A missing mother. A daughter with a troubled relationship. A boyfriend who never should have had this kind of power over a teenager. A late-night conversation in a Denny's where other people heard enough to know something was very, very wrong. When Vanessa is finally caught and brought into the system, people struggle with what to call her. Is she a manipulated child who got pulled into something by an older, controlling boyfriend? Or is she fully responsible, a willing architect of her mother's murder? The court had to decide. But as you listen to this story, here's what matters. A mother is gone. Her last experience on this earth was not love, not peace, not closure, but terror, and the knowledge that one of the people destroying her was her own daughter. And it all began in a booth under harsh restaurant lights, with teens dropping acid and talking about how to remove an obstacle from their lives. This is what makes these cases so hard to process. With strangers, with serial killers, with intruders, there's distance. It's horrifying, but you can say, that's them, not us. With stories like Vanessa's, that distance disappears. These aren't monsters born in the shadows. They're kids sitting in classrooms, walking in malls, scrolling on their phones. They are daughters. And in this case, a daughter decided that keeping her boyfriend was worth more than keeping her mother alive. Tell me in the comments. When you hear about Vanessa Robinson, do you see a victim of manipulation or a willing participant in evil? Because next, we're going to another case, another daughter, another home. And this time, when a mother is found dead, it's the child's behavior after the killing that will make investigators' blood run cold. We move from Florida to the American Midwest. A different state, a different town, but the same nightmare starting to take shape. A mother, a daughter, and a house where something has gone horribly wrong. This is the case of Chastania Reeves. For neighbors in Gary, Indiana, the story begins the way so many tragedies do, not with screaming, not with sirens, but with a feeling that something is off. A house that should be awake is too quiet. A woman who should be seen going to work, dropping kids off, running errands, isn't. Her name is Jamie Garnett. She's a mother. She has kids depending on her. And then suddenly she's not around. At first, it looks like she simply vanished, but she didn't. Her body was in the house the whole time. It would be discovered stuffed in a freezer. Let that image hit you. Not a grave, not even a hurried attempt to hide a body outside. A freezer, in the same home where she once cooked meals, poured drinks, opened and closed that very door to keep food cold for her kids. Now she is the thing being kept cold. When police arrive and make that discovery, they are faced not just with the brutality of a killing, but with a chilling, calculated effort to preserve and conceal. You don't accidentally put someone in a freezer. You don't accidentally walk past that door day after day, knowing what's inside. You have to decide to do that. You have to live with it. But there's another piece of this puzzle that sends the story spinning. While Jamie's body is hidden inside her own home, her 14-year-old daughter, Chastania, is missing. At first, the community is told to fear the worst for her. Amber alerts are issued. Her face appears on the news as a potential victim. The narrative makes sense on the surface. A murdered mother, a missing daughter, kidnapping, abduction. Did someone break in and take them both, one killed, one stolen? The city starts to look for Chastania. People share her photo, pray, speculate, worry. But the truth, when it begins to come out, will not be the story of a child snatched from safety. It will be something much darker, because when Chastania is finally found, she is alive. She has not been dragged off to a second crime scene. She is not chained in a basement or tied up in a stranger's car. She is moving around freely. And slowly, painfully, investigators begin to realize the missing girl is not just a missing child. She may be at the center of the murder they're trying to solve. According to what comes out in the investigation, this wasn't a case of a daughter who left home in fear of an unknown intruder. This was a case where the danger may have come from inside that relationship. The timeline that follows is deeply disturbing. A mother is killed. Her body is pushed into a freezer, an act that requires effort, thought, and time. The daughter disappears, sparking a public manhunt. She's eventually found alive. And then, The focus turns sharply inward. It goes from, "Where is Chastinea?" to, "What does Chastinea know?" And then, to a harder question, what did she do? As the truth surfaces, the story many people first believed mother and daughter, both victims, starts to fracture. Information from the case shows a home with strain, conflict, and a daughter whose actions after the killing don't match the script of someone in pure shock and grief. Most kids who find a murdered parent do something predictable. They scream, they run, they call for help. They don't vanish while the body sits hidden in a freezer. They don't become the subject of an Amber Alert that looks less like a rescue mission and more like cover for a disappearing act. When it emerges that Chastinea has been charged in connection with her mother's death, the community that once prayed for her safety now has to mentally flip everything they thought they knew. The victim on the poster may also be the perpetrator, and the true, silent victim in the story, the one who never got a headline with her own smiling face, is Jamie, the mother. Imagine her last hours. Did she argue with her daughter? Did she beg? Did she see it coming at all? Or was it like a switch being flipped one moment, a mother trying to correct or protect her child, the next, a target? We may never know every word spoken in that home before Jamie ended up where police would find her. What we do know is the result. A mother gone. A body hidden in a freezer. A daughter who became the focus of a murder investigation. Once again, we are forced to face the same impossible split we saw with Carly Gregg and Valessa Robinson. At 14, at 15, at these ages, are we looking at children who snapped? Or are we looking at full participants in evil, capable of planning, hiding, and lying in ways that even adults struggle to comprehend? I want you to think about this. It takes time to move a body. It takes effort to force it into a freezer. It takes coldness to close that door and walk away. What kind of mind can do that? And then keep going, knowing exactly where their mother is? Drop your thoughts in the comments. When you hear about Chastinea Reeves, do you feel more horror at the act itself, or at the calm after? Because as dark as this case is, we're still not done. We've seen a girl calmly walking past her murdered mother. We've seen a daughter allegedly plan her mother's death in a Denny's booth. We've seen a child tied to a body hidden in a freezer. Next, we're going to California, where a teenage girl and her older boyfriend would decide that the only way to stay together was to make sure her mother never stood in their way again. We move to California, a different state. Same chilling pattern. A strict mother, a teenage daughter, an older boyfriend, and the belief that the only way to keep their twisted version of love alive was to make sure Mum didn't live long enough to stop it. This is the case of Tyler Witt. Tyler wasn't a little kid. She was a teenager, moving through the world with all the intensity, drama, and defiance that comes with that age turned up past the normal limit. Her mother, Joanne Witt, saw danger in front of her and tried to slam on the brakes. Joanne didn't just dislike Tyler's boyfriend, Stephen Culver, because he was a bad influence or some immature teen. He was an adult. Tyler was underage. Joanne discovered explicit messages, sexual content, proof that the relationship had crossed not only moral lines but legal ones. So she did what any responsible parent is supposed to do. She went to the police. She reported him. She worked with authorities. She was ready to testify, to stand in court and say clearly, is greater than, this man is having an illegal relationship with my underage daughter. In Joanne's mind, she was saving Tyler. In Tyler's mind, her mother had just become the enemy. Think about the emotional collision happening inside this teenager. On one side, a mother trying to protect her child, even if it means her child hates her for it. On the other, a girl who believes this man is her soulmate, her escape, her everything, and now Mom is threatening to send him to prison. To Tyler, Joanne wasn't just strict. She wasn't just controlling. She was a weapon pointed at the one thing Tyler believed she needed. And there, in that emotional hurricane, a thought takes root, the same poisonous thought we've already seen tonight. What if she was just gone? Tyler and Stephen begin to talk, not about running away and starting over, not about waiting until Tyler is older. They talk about getting rid of Joanne. And this isn't some passing drug-fueled fantasy thrown around in a diner at 2 a.m. This becomes a plan. Joanne writes in her journal. She continues to work with law enforcement. She has no idea that, as she tries to build a legal case against Stephen, He and her own daughter are building something else, a plan to make sure that case never reaches a courtroom, because the main witness will be dead. There's something especially chilling in this situation. Joanne did everything society tells a mother to do. She found out about an illegal, dangerous relationship. She didn't ignore it. She didn't turn a blind eye. She went to the authorities. And for that, she earned a spot at the top of her daughter's hit list. The night it happens is not cinematic. No thunderstorm, no horror movie soundtrack, just a house in El Dorado Hills, a mother at home, and two young people who have convinced themselves that murder is the solution. They decide to attack while Joanne is sleeping. There is no argument, no long final speech, no chance for Joanne to see it coming and defend herself. She goes to bed as a mother exhausted by legal battles, teenage drama, and the constant fear that she might be losing her daughter. She has no idea that her daughter has already decided she will lose much more than that. Tyler and Stephen enter her bedroom. What happens next is brutal. At one point, this crime was described as overkill, not a single, clean act, but a frenzied attack, a violence that went far beyond what would be needed to end a life. The weapon is turned on Joanne with devastating force. Think, for a moment, about the betrayal in that room. You are asleep. You trust that in your own home, you are safe. If you wake up, it might be to the sound of your daughter moving around, or the creak of the house settling. Not to this. Not to your child, present while you are being murdered. Not to the knowledge, in your last seconds, that the person you went to war for, the one you tried to protect, has chosen the person you were protecting her from. By the time it's over, Joanne is gone. Not in a hospital, not surrounded by loved ones. On her bedroom floor, in the home she paid for, in the space she maintained, in the place she thought she could fight for her daughter's future. Tyler and Stephen don't call for help. They don't try to save her. They move on to cover-up mode. They try to clean. They try to hide what they've done. They run. They cling to each other like some twisted version of a couple on the run. Bonnie and Clyde without the charm, just the horror. It doesn't last. The law catches up. It always does. When the truth starts to spill, the messages, the discussions, the planning, the attempts to erase Joanne from the picture, it becomes clear that this was not a momentary explosion. It was a choice, a series of choices, made over days and weeks. To see Joanne as a barrier, to talk about killing her, to pick a night, to go into that room, to go through with it, to leave her there. When the justice system steps in, the key questions become: how much was Tyler responsible? How much did Stephen influence her? Was she brainwashed, manipulated, or fully aware and complicit? The court ultimately decides. Tyler is not just a bystander. She is not just a scared kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. She is a participant. Stephen, as the older boyfriend, faces his own fate. Tyler, as the daughter who helped set her own mother up to die, faces hers. But no matter what numbers a judge writes on paper, 10 years, 20 years, life, it will never balance the weight of what happened in that bedroom. Joanne did everything right. She saw danger. She went to police. She tried to pull her daughter out of a toxic, illegal situation, and in return, she died at the hands of the very people she was fighting. I want you to sit with one question after Tyler's case. If a mother can follow every rule, take every step the system tells her to take, and still end up dead at the hands of her own child, what does that say about how far some of these daughters are willing to go once they've convinced themselves that love plus freedom are worth more than a mother's life? Let me know in the comments. Do you believe Tyler Witt was more a victim of an older manipulator, or more a willing architect of her mother's murder? Because the line between those two is where this entire video lives. And we're not done. Next, we're leaving the United States. We're heading to the United Kingdom, where a teenage girl will become the country's youngest female double murderer, and the level of cruelty in that case will haunt even hardened investigators. We leave the suburbs of California and cross the Atlantic. Different country, different streets, same nightmare. This time, we're in Ipswich, England, a town with its own struggles, poverty, addiction, broken homes, but also ordinary people trying to survive one day at a time. In the middle of that world is a girl, Lorraine Thorpe. She is 15 years old. By the end of her story, she will be known as Britain's youngest ever female double murderer. Not just a troubled teen, not just a fighter, a girl who helped take not one, but two lives and seemed to feel almost nothing about it. Lorraine didn't grow up in a cozy, stable home. From a young age, she was raised in a world of chaos. An alcoholic father, a life surrounded by drinkers, addicts, drifters, nights spent not in a warm bedroom, but on sofas, in flats, in places where violence and shouting weren't rare, they were normal. She became what some people called a street kid, living around the fringes of society, attached to a loose network of adults who saw her more as an accessory than a child. One of those adults was a much older man named Paul Clark. He was in his 42nd. She was still a teenager. To some, he was a father figure. To others, he was an abuser, a manipulator, a dangerous presence. To Lorraine, he was a twisted kind of anchor in a world that never gave her any solid ground. Their relationship, whatever label you put on it, was intense, toxic, and deadly. The people around them were part of a rough, alcohol-heavy scene. Arguments, grudges, petty revenge, it all brewed constantly under the surface. The first life that would be taken belonged to Lorraine's own father, Desmond Thorpe. Desmond was not a perfect man. He was an alcoholic, someone who had failed his daughter in many ways, but he was still her father. One day, he did something unforgivable in Paul Clark's eyes. He reportedly grassed, a British term for informing to police. In their world, being called a grass is a death sentence. Clark grew furious, and he wasn't alone. Lorraine, Desmond's own daughter, was right there, and instead of defending her father, instead of stepping in to protect him, she joined in. The details are brutal. Desmond is subjected to a sustained attack. He is beaten, stomped, and assaulted with levels of violence that go far beyond a quick flash of anger. Lorraine isn't just in the room. According to the court, she takes part. She kicks, she hits, she helps. Her own father, one of the few people in the world tied to her by blood, by history, by responsibility, even if he failed miserably at it. You can try to tell yourself she was scared. You can try to tell yourself she was doing what Paul wanted, terrified of saying no. But the violence doesn't end there. After Desmond is killed, there is another issue. Another person knows too much. A woman named Rosalind Hunt. Rosalind was older, 41, and lived in the same world of drink and chaos. She had connections to the same group. She knew what had happened to Desmond, or at least enough of it. And in the cold logic of that world, if someone knows too much, they become a problem. Clark and Lorraine decide she has to go. The way Rosalind dies is vicious. She is tortured, beaten, kicked, stomped on, burned with cigarettes. Neighbors later recall hearing desperate screams. When they finally saw what had been done to her, even experienced officers were sickened. Her injuries were so catastrophic that the pathologist described it as one of the worst cases of sustained violence they had ever seen. And in the center of it is a 15-year-old girl. Not a bystander, not someone hiding in the corner begging it to stop. The court would hear testimony that Lorraine took part, that she joined in, that she wasn't just dragged along by an older man, but was an active participant in the torture and murder of Rosalind. At one point, it was alleged that she jumped on Rosalind's chest with both feet, essentially using her body as something to be crushed. Rosalind didn't just die. She suffered, for a long time, at the hands of adults, and a child who had already helped murder her own father. When police finally piece it together, Lorraine is not some tragic, silent shadow in the background. She is front and center. They see the injuries. They hear the witnesses. They listen to Lorraine's own words. And what chills them isn't just what she did. It's what she didn't show. Real remorse. Real horror. Real understanding of the depth of what she had done. She and Clark are both arrested, both charged, both dragged into the justice system. Clark is seen as the ringleader, the older predator, the one who weaponized this damaged child. But the system refuses to pretend Lorraine is just an accessory. She is charged with 2 counts of murder. Her father, Desmond Thorpe, Rosalind Hunt. In the courtroom, she looks small, young, almost harmless. But the photos of the bodies, the descriptions of the injuries, the testimonies of neighbors and witnesses do not match that image. The jury sees through the gap between appearance and reality. They find her guilty. Lorraine Thorpe earns a title no one should ever have. Britain's youngest female double murderer. At 15, she is sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term set by the court. She will one day be older, maybe more reflective, maybe broken by the weight of time. But she can never unknow what she did. She can never unsee those scenes. 2 people are dead. One of them her father. One of them a woman whose last hours on earth were filled with terror and agony. The question that Lorraine's case forces you to ask is brutal. Where do we draw the line between what made her and what she chose? Yes, she grew up in chaos. Yes, she was surrounded by alcohol, neglect, and predators. Yes, she was vulnerable to someone like Paul Clark. But at 15, she still kicked, stomped, joined in. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, innocence and experience, Lorraine Thorpe crossed a line so far that even the courts, even the experts, labeled her with a title usually reserved for hardened adults. I want to know what you think. When you hear Lorraine's story, do you feel more anger at the adult who pulled her into this, or at the teen who chose to become what he was? Tell me in the comments, because as horrifying as this is, we're about to step into something even more complicated. Cases where teen daughters are accused, but not yet convicted. Girls who stand in court, facing camera flashes and murder charges, while insisting they are innocent. And one of them didn't just stand in the shadows. She allegedly walked straight into the spotlight and tried to turn her own case into content. We're staying with the theme of teen daughters and mothers. But now, we're stepping into something even more unsettling. A case that isn't just about what allegedly happened inside a house, but what happened online afterward. This is the case of Sarah Grace Patrick. And before we go any further, we need to be crystal clear. Sarah has been charged. She has not been convicted as of now. Everything you're about to hear is based on what prosecutors allege, what is written in court documents, and what's been reported by reputable outlets like People and Fox 5. These are allegations, not proven facts, in a final verdict. With that said, the story is chilling. We're in Georgia, USA, a home where, from the outside, things look like what many people would call normal. Church, routine, a family that, at a glance, gives off stability. Inside that house are a father, Derek, a mother, Tyler, their children including 16-year-old Sarah and her 6-year-old sister. Whatever tensions existed inside that home, the outside world didn't expect what would come next. One night, that 6-year-old wakes up to a reality that even hardened detectives struggle with. She finds her parents dead. According to what's been reported, both had been shot. Think about that for a moment from the child's perspective. You're 6. You still sleep with stuffed animals. You believe your parents are the ones who chase the monsters away. You wake up, walk through your house, and find the people who are supposed to protect you, lying still, surrounded by blood, never getting back up. That little girl calls for help, and soon, police arrive at what they now know will be a double homicide scene. Inside the house, 2 dead parents. Alive, the children, and among them, the teen daughter, Sarah Grace Patrick. From here, the story splits into 2 disturbing paths. 1. What allegedly happened before the bodies were found. 2. What allegedly happened online afterward. According to prosecutors, Sarah is not just a traumatized witness. They allege she's the one who pulled the trigger. Charging documents and investigators' statements say that she shot both of her parents inside the family home. The exact sequence who was shot first, what words were said, what led up to it, are matters for the court. But the accusation is clear. A 16-year-old daughter stands accused of murdering both her mother and father. As if that isn't shocking enough on its own, it's what allegedly happens in the days that follow that has stunned people around the world. Because instead of disappearing, instead of hiding from attention, Sarah reportedly did something else entirely. She went online. According to multiple reports, she reached out to true crime content creators, TikTokers, YouTubers, influencers, and allegedly asked them to cover the story of her parents' murders. Not as a confession, not as a warning, as content. Imagine opening your DMs and seeing a message like that. A teenage girl tells you her parents have been killed. She sends you details. She urges you to talk about it on your channel, to make a video, to share her tragedy with your audience. At first glance, you might think, she's a victim. She wants justice. She wants her parents' story told. But then the news breaks. That same girl, the one messaging true crime creators, is now the prime suspect, charged with 2 counts of murder. Those DMs suddenly feel different. not like a victim seeking justice, but like a suspect helping build the narrative around her own alleged crime. In one hearing, cameras in the courtroom capture Sarah's face. Some reports describe her as smiling at points, then breaking down, crying later. People see those clips and react immediately. How can she smile? Is she faking the tears? Is this shock, or is this something colder? We have to be careful here. People in shock behave in strange, unpredictable ways. A courtroom is a pressure cooker: fear, confusion, adrenaline, performance, all mixed together. We do not know what is truly going on in her mind. But taken together, the allegations of murder, the messages to true crime creators, the courtroom footage it creates, one of the most disturbing portraits of a modern teen suspect we've seen, a girl who allegedly killed her parents, then allegedly tried to turn the story into content. A girl who is now the focus of the exact type of videos she was once trying to encourage. This case hits a different nerve than the others tonight. With Carly, Valessa, Chastania, Tyler, and Lorraine, you're dealing with rage, betrayal, drugs, manipulation, broken homes, brutal violence. With Sarah Grace Patrick, you're dealing with all of that plus something else. The way social media twists tragedy. In this era, everything is a post, a story, a video, a trending topic. But what happens when the person allegedly behind the crime tries to plug themselves into that system, to consciously or unconsciously shape how millions of strangers will see them? Is that narcissism? Is it shock? Is it desperation? Is it something darker? Remember, Sarah is innocent until proven guilty. She's been charged, not convicted. She will have her day in court. A jury will weigh the evidence, both for and against her. But we're allowed to ask questions about what this case says about us, about an audience that consumes true crime like entertainment, about kids who grow up watching those videos and understanding the mechanics of viral tragedy, about what happens when someone allegedly at the center of the crime decides to feed that machine themselves. I want to ask you directly, when you hear this story about a teen who allegedly killed her parents, then allegedly reached out to TikTok creators to talk about it, what scares you more? The alleged killings themselves, or the idea that someone might see their own family's murder as something to be covered, shared, and reacted to by strangers? Let me know in the comments, because from here, we move to another case tied to allegations, accusation, and family annihilation. One where a teen girl is accused of helping turn her own home into a staged crime scene, and investigators say what looked like a brutal break-in was something much closer to home. We stay in the world of alleged family annihilation, another quiet house, another set of parents dead, another teen daughter at the center of a story that, at first, looks like one thing, and then starts to look like something else entirely. This is the case of Julia Grace Egler, and again, I need to be clear up front. Julia has been charged, not convicted. Everything here is based on prosecutors' allegations, early reports, and charging documents. She is presumed innocent until a court decides otherwise. With that in mind, here's what investigators say happened. We're in a comfortable, seemingly safe family home. On the outside, it's the picture of ordinary life. Parents in their 42nds and 52nds. A teenage daughter, Julia. A neighborhood that doesn't expect police tape and coroner's vans. Then one day, that picture shatters. Police are called to the house. Inside, they find something every officer dreads: 2 dead parents. The scene, at first glance, suggests something terrifying but familiar. A violent break-in. A home invasion gone deadly. The kind of random violence everyone fears when they hear a noise at night. There are signs of forced entry, or at least, that's how it appears. Things are disturbed. There's damage. There is blood. It looks like a nightmare you might warn your family about. Lock the doors. Set the alarm. Watch out for people trying to get in. But as detectives move through the scene, something starts to bother them. Details that don't line up. Damage that looks performed. Signs of struggle that feel too neat, too placed. Crime scene work is slow, methodical. You don't just see blood and say break-in. You analyze angles, patterns, timing, consistency, and slowly an uncomfortable question starts to surface. Is this really an intruder's work, or is it a staged scene? As investigators dig deeper, they begin to suspect the second. According to prosecutors, what happened in that house was not a random home invasion, but a planned attack from within, with the scene manipulated afterward to look like something else. At the heart of this theory is the teen daughter, Julia Grace Egler. Authorities allege that Julia was involved in the deaths of her parents, and that steps were taken to make it seem as if someone had broken in and done this. Think about what that means if it's true. You don't just decide to kill. You decide how the story will look when police arrive. You don't just commit violence. You commit theater. You break what needs to be broken. You disturb what needs to look disturbed. You make sure that when someone else walks in, they'll say, "This wasn't done by family. This was a stranger." That's what staging is. A lie told with objects, blood, and broken glass. Staging tells you something critical about any alleged killers. It says they're thinking beyond the moment. They're thinking in terms of narrative. What will police think? What will neighbors think? How do I make them believe something else? In this case, prosecutors claim that the home invasion was just that, a narrative, not the truth. Meanwhile, two very real people are gone. A mother and father whose daily lives probably looked like this. Work, bills, worrying about their child's future, planning meals, holidays, school events. They did not go to sleep thinking their biggest threat was inside their own four walls. They did not expect their last chapter would be written in a file labeled homicide, with their own daughter's name in the suspect section. Now picture the investigation from Julia's perspective. In the beginning, she is part of the tragedy. The teen who lost her parents. The surviving child in what looks like a brutal invasion. The girl people might initially see as a victim of whoever did this. Maybe people comfort her. Maybe police question her gently at first, wanting to protect a traumatized minor. But over time, something shifts. The questions get sharper. The tone gets colder. What time did you go to bed? What did you hear? Where were you before this happened? Who had keys? Why does this detail look wrong? Small inconsistencies start to matter. Stories that change even slightly raise alarms. Digital forensics, phones, messages, searches begin to paint a second picture. Not of a random attacker picking this house out of all the others, but of premeditation, motive, resentment, and opportunity inside the family itself. Eventually, the shift becomes official. Julia is no longer treated as just a surviving victim. She is arrested, charged. Her mugshot joins the same online feeds where only days or weeks earlier, people were posting sympathy for her loss. The state says, this was not an attack on this family from the outside. This was an attack from within. A teenage daughter, allegedly part of a plan to eliminate the two people who brought her into the world, and then cover it up with broken glass and a fake story. Again, these are allegations. Julia has the right to defend herself. Her lawyers will have their say. A jury will decide what to believe. But once again, we are faced with the same theme that runs through every case tonight. The place you're told is safest. The people you're told will always protect you. In these stories, they're the targets, and the people the world says you should trust the most are the ones prosecutors say pulled the trigger, held the knife, made the plan, closed the freezer, or staged the scene. I want to know how this one hits you. What scares you more? The idea of a stranger kicking in your door, or the possibility that someone inside your own house might someday look at you and see an obstacle? Tell me in the comments. Because from here, we move into a case where it's not just one daughter, it's two, twins, and the woman they were supposed to love would die in a scene so brutal, it would change their lives forever and destroy every definition of family they ever had. We've seen one daughter turn on a mother. We've seen daughters turn on mothers and fathers. Now we step into something even harder to comprehend. Not one child, but two, twin sisters. Same birthday, same house, same mother, and one day, the same crime. This is the case of Tasmiyah and Jasmiyah Whitehead. To their neighbors in Conyers, Georgia, they were just the twins. Two teenage girls living with their mother, Jamaica Nikki Whitehead, in a modest suburban home. From the outside, it looked like a regular family. A hard-working single mother trying to raise her daughters. Teen girls dealing with school, boys, friends, growing pains. Normal teenage friction. But behind the front door, the tension between Nikki and the twins was explosive. The girls had spent time living with their great-grandmother. They didn't always stay under Nikki's roof. When the court ordered that they live with their mother again, resentments boiled over. Arguments weren't rare. They were constant. Neighbors would later say they'd heard screaming, seen fights spill outside. The police had been called before. The bond between mother and daughters was badly damaged. Nikki tried to enforce rules, curfews, school, chores. The twins wanted freedom, independence, control. Two forces collided in that small house. A mother determined not to lose her girls, and daughters who believed they were old enough not to be told what to do. On the morning of the 13th of January 2010, a frantic 911 call came in. One of the twins, her voice shaking, told the operator they had come home to a nightmare. Their mother, Nikki, was dead. She had been brutally attacked. When police arrived, the scene inside that house on Cherry Hill Drive looked like something out of a horror story. The violence wasn't quick. It wasn't clean. It was rage carved into flesh. Nikki had been stabbed, beaten, cut, again and again. There was blood everywhere. This wasn't a single strike from a burglar surprised by a homeowner. It looked like a sustained, frenzied attack by someone who wasn't just trying to kill. They were trying to express something through the violence. Anger, hatred, years of resentment. The twins told officers they had found their mother like that. They cried. They told a story about a possible intruder, about coming home and discovering the scene too late. On the surface, it could have been believable. Two teenage girls, terrified, allegedly returning to find their mother's body. But investigators started noticing details. Little things, scratches, bite marks, injuries on the twins that didn't quite match the story of frightened girls walking into a finished crime scene. The more detectives looked, the less the mystery intruder made sense. Who breaks into a home and unleashes that level of personal, up-close violence, and leaves nothing behind but a wake of destruction and no clear motive? What did Nikki have that a robber wanted that badly? What could a stranger possibly be so angry about? Then there were the autopsy findings. The pattern of injuries told a story. Nikki had defensive wounds she had tried to fight back. The attack had gone on long enough that this wasn't a lightning-quick assault. The weapon had been used repeatedly, brutally, with a kind of intimacy you don't normally see in a random break-in. Police began looking closer at the twins. Their relationship with Nikki was far from a secret. They'd fought in public. They'd had run-ins with the law. They'd clashed over rules, curfews, everything. The court orders forcing them back under Nikki's roof had built up a pressure cooker of resentment. As interviews continued, the twins' stories shifted. Small inconsistencies, timeline changes, details that moved around. That's the thing about lies. They're hard enough to keep straight when you're alone. They're almost impossible to synchronize between two people under pressure. Over time, the cracks widened. The image of the devastated daughters began to dissolve, replaced by something darker, the suspicion that the girls weren't outside victims of a home invasion. They were inside the crime from the start. Eventually, the pressure, the evidence, and the weight of what had happened became too much. The truth came out. In separate statements, in different ways, it was revealed. The attacker was not a stranger. It was them. Tasmia and Jasmia had gotten into yet another explosive argument with their mother that morning. At some point, that argument boiled over into a physical fight. And then, knives, objects, anything that could be used as a weapon. The twin daughters turned on Nikki in a violent struggle that would leave her dead. Her last moments were not of peaceful acceptance. They were of terror and pain, as the two people she had given life to stood over her, weapons in hand. Afterwards, the girls tried to fix the unfixable. They staged. They lied. They created the intruder story, hoping to redirect suspicion. When those lies unraveled, they had to face what they'd done. In court, the twins, once defiant, once so determined to take control of their own lives in that house, did something else. They pleaded guilty. Both sisters admitted to their roles in Nikki's murder. They received long prison sentences, 30 years each. They walked into those courtrooms as teens. They will walk out, if they do, as middle-aged women. The Whitehead case shakes people because it violates not one, but two sacred ideas at once. One, that a mother will lay down her life for her children. Two, that, even in the worst conflict, children won't cross that final line. Here, both ideas broke. A mother died, not protecting her kids from an outside threat, but being killed by them. Two daughters, bound not just by blood but by the mirror image in each other's faces, made a choice that morning. and then lived together with the secret until it finally broke them. I want you to think about this. Is there anything a parent can do that you believe justifies what those girls did? Is there any level of strictness, yelling, grounding, arguing, control, that could ever make you say, yes, I understand why they did this? Or do you see this as something beyond understanding? Something that can't be fixed by context, excuses, or explanations? Let me know in the comments, because the pattern tonight is impossible to ignore. We've seen daughters calmly walk through crime scenes they allegedly created. We've seen them plan in diners, hide bodies in freezers, stage home invasions, turn on both parents, and even step into the online spotlight afterward. But we're still not done. Next, we go to a case where the violence wasn't just shocking, it was overkill of the worst kind. A girl who didn't just kill her mother. She allegedly stabbed her more than 40 times and tried to hide the body right behind the house. We've seen daughters shoot. We've seen daughters plot. We've seen daughters stage and lie. Now we're stepping into something even more visceral. A killing where the violence isn't just enough to end a life. It's so excessive, so repetitive, that it turns a murder into a message. This wasn't about stopping a heart. This was about unleashing something. This is the case of Nakisha Waddell. According to reporting referenced by CBS News, Nakisha was 14 years old when she killed her mother. 14, an age where you're supposed to be figuring out high school, not homicide. Her mother, Donna, wasn't a stranger to struggle. She was trying, in her own imperfect way, to hold a family together. There were rules. There were arguments. There was tension like in so many homes with teenagers testing limits. On the day it happened, there was no clear sign to outsiders that this would be the day a line was crossed that could never be uncrossed. No SWAT team parked outside. No alarms blaring. Just a teenage girl, a mother, and a house that would soon hold a secret no one could have imagined. The weapon Nakisha chose was not distant. No gunshot from across a room. She picked up something that demanded she get close. Something that made her feel the resistance of flesh, the warmth of blood. A knife. The first stab is already unthinkable. You are a child. The person in front of you is the one who brought you into this world. You raise a blade and drive it into her body. Most people can't even imagine doing that once. Nakisha didn't stop at once. She didn't stop at 5 times. She didn't stop at 10 or 15 or 20. According to the reports, her mother was stabbed 43 times. 43. Let that number sit with you. Imagine the seconds it takes to swing a knife. 1, 2, 3. Now multiply that out. 43 plunges of metal into flesh. 43 impacts. 43 moments where a daughter sees what she's doing and has a chance to stop, and doesn't. A pathologist later described the killing as a form of overkill. Violence so far beyond what would be necessary to cause death that it screams of rage, loss of control, and something deep and molten just beneath the surface. Donna didn't just die. She fought. Her body showed defensive wounds. Marks on her hands and arms where she'd tried to ward off the blade, to grab it, to protect herself. In those horrible seconds, this wasn't mum versus daughter in a verbal argument. It was a woman fighting for her life against a child she once carried inside her body. We will never know the exact words spoken in those moments. Stop. Please. Why are you doing this? They're gone, swallowed by the walls of that house and the silence that followed. What we do know is that when it was over, Donna's body lay lifeless. 43 stab wounds carved into her, blood everywhere, and her killer was her 14-year-old daughter. But even that isn't where it ends, because what Nakisha does after the stabbing takes this case to another level. She doesn't call for help. She doesn't scream for someone to save her mother. She doesn't turn herself in. Instead, she turns to concealment. According to reports, Nakisha dragged or moved her mother's body out of the house, into the backyard, and there, behind the home where Donna had tried to raise her daughter, the girl began trying to bury her. A makeshift grave, shallow, close, not in some far-off woods, not off a highway miles away. Right there, behind the house. Imagine standing at a window and looking out, knowing that under that disturbed soil, beneath that patch of ground, lies your mother. If you are willing to stab someone 43 times, you might think you are ready for anything. But no matter how deeply you bury a body, You can't bury questions. Where is Donna? Why is she missing? Why does her teenage daughter seem so off? Just like in the other cases we've seen, the outside world begins to sense that something is wrong. People notice her absence. Police get involved. The trail leads not to a stranger, not to a kidnapper, but back to the home, back to the backyard, back to the disturbed earth where a daughter tried to hide what she had done. When the truth surfaces, it is almost too much to process. A 10-year-old girl. A knife. 43 stab wounds. A body dragged outside. A grave in the yard. Experts later talked about this case as something different from the calculated murders we sometimes see with older daughters and co-conspirators. They described it as more of a crime of passion, the culmination of rage, hatred, and emotional collapse. But there's something important in that phrase. Crime of passion doesn't excuse. It doesn't erase the fact that at any stab between 1 and 43, Nikisha could have stopped. She didn't. The court system looked at her age and her actions and struggled with the same questions we've been wrestling with this entire video. Where is the line between child and killer? How do you sentence a 14-year-old for something like this? Too light, and you disrespect the victim. Too heavy, and you risk ignoring the fact that a child's brain, emotions, and judgment are not fully formed. No sentence can give Donna her life back. No number of years can erase the image of a teenage girl standing over a torn, broken body with a knife in her hand and a half-dug grave waiting outside. This is the part I want you to think about. There is nothing quick about 43 stab wounds. There is nothing accidental about dragging a body and starting to bury it. That takes time. Time to see. Time to feel. Time to decide, again and again, to keep going. What does that tell you about where Nikisha was emotionally? Broken child in a moment of absolute loss of control? Or something colder, darker, more deliberate? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because if you thought this was as far as a teen daughter could go, our final case tonight proves otherwise. We're going to talk about a girl who killed her mother at 14, and then, years later, almost stepped onto the campus of an Ivy League university with her crime buried in the past, until the truth resurfaced and shattered that new life before it could even begin. We've seen the raw, brutal violence. We've seen the cold calculation. We've seen the desperate attempts to cover up. Now, for our final case tonight, we're going to look at a story that adds another layer of chilling complexity. What happens when a teen daughter commits murder and then tries to erase it from her past? This is the case of Gina Grant, and it's a story that will make you question everything you think you know about second chances, redemption, and whether a crime can ever truly be left behind. The year is 1990. The place is Lexington, South Carolina. Gina is 14 years old. She lives with her mother, Dorothy Mae "Dolly" Grant. Like many of the cases we've explored tonight, the relationship between mother and daughter is strained. There are arguments, there are tensions, there are the usual teenage battles for independence. But on the 13th of September 1990, those tensions explode into something irreversible. Dolly Grant is found dead in her home. The scene is initially confusing. It looks like a tragic accident, a fire, a struggle. But as investigators dig deeper, the story begins to unravel. The official cause of death is not the fire. It's blunt force trauma. Dolly Grant was beaten to death. And the person who allegedly delivered those fatal blows? Her own daughter, Gina. According to what emerges in the investigation, Gina didn't act alone. She had an accomplice, her boyfriend, Randy Stone. Together, they allegedly attacked Dolly. The details are brutal. Dolly was struck repeatedly with a heavy object, a lead crystal candlestick. The attack was so severe that it left her with catastrophic injuries. After the murder, the pair allegedly tried to cover their tracks. They attempted to stage the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. They tried to set the house on fire to destroy evidence. But just like in Julia Egler's case, staged scenes rarely hold up under forensic scrutiny. Fires rarely consume all the evidence. The truth, like a stubborn ghost, begins to emerge. Gina and Randy are arrested, charged, and the community is left reeling. How could a 14-year-old girl, with a boyfriend, commit such a brutal act against her own mother? Gina is tried as an adult. She pleads no contest to voluntary manslaughter. She is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Randy Stone, her boyfriend, also pleads guilty to murder and receives a longer sentence. So, the justice system does its work. Gina serves her time. She is released. And here's where her story takes a turn that makes it unique among the cases we've discussed tonight. Gina Grant doesn't disappear into obscurity. She doesn't fade into the background. She tries to build a new life, and she does it with remarkable success. She excels in school. She becomes a model student. She dedicates herself to her studies, to community service, to proving that she is more than her past. She applies to colleges, and she gets accepted. Not just to any college, to Harvard University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. Imagine the moment. A young woman, having served her time, having seemingly turned her life around, is on the cusp of a fresh start, a brilliant future. She has overcome her past. She has earned her place. But there's a problem. On her application, Gina did not disclose her criminal record. She didn't mention the murder. She didn't mention the prison time. She presented herself as a bright, ambitious student with a clean slate, and for a while, it worked. She was accepted. She was ready to enroll. Then, a newspaper article surfaces. A reporter, digging into her past, uncovers the truth. The story breaks. Harvard accepts convicted killer. The revelation sends shockwaves through the university, the media, and the public. Should Harvard revoke her admission? Does everyone deserve a second chance, even for murder? Does lying on an application negate any progress she's made? The debate rages. Gina, through her lawyers, argues that she has paid her debt to society, that she has changed, that she deserves the opportunity to move forward. Harvard, caught in a firestorm of controversy, is forced to make a decision. Ultimately, they rescind her admission. Gina Grant's dream of an Ivy League education, of a completely fresh start, is shattered. Not because she wasn't smart enough, not because she didn't work hard enough, but because the past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing. This case forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions. Can someone who commits such a heinous act at 14 truly be rehabilitated? If they serve their time, do they deserve a complete erasure of their past? Or does the truth of what they did, especially to a parent, follow them forever? Gina Grant's story is a stark reminder that while the law might offer a path to freedom, the moral and ethical questions surrounding these crimes linger. Her mother, Dolly, never got a second chance. Her life was brutally cut short, and Gina, despite her efforts to build a new future, found that the shadow of that night in 1990 was long enough to reach even the hallowed halls of Harvard. It's a powerful, unsettling end to our journey through these 10 cases. If you've been with us through all these stories, if you've found this deep dive into the darkest corners of human behavior compelling, terrifying, or thought-provoking, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us continue to bring you these in-depth, unvarnished explorations of true crime. Because these stories, as difficult as they are, need to be told. They are real people, real victims, and real questions that demand our attention. Now, let's bring it all together. In our final segment, we'll recap the patterns we've seen, reflect on the profound implications of these cases, and ask some final, crucial questions that will stay with you long after this video ends. You've just heard 10 stories, 10 daughters, 10 families, 10 lives taken in ways that should never have been possible inside a home. Let's step back and look at what we've just walked through together. We started with Carly Madison Gregg, a 14-year-old girl calmly walking through a hallway with her mother's body behind her, sending the words, "Es mayor que, come see a dead body." No panic, no visible remorse, just a teenager in a band shirt moving through a crime scene she allegedly created. Then we sat in that Denny's booth with Vanessa Robinson and her friends, LSD flowing, late-night laughter, and a conversation that shifted from "I hate my mom" to how to erase her, a plan that ended with Vicki Robinson dead and stuffed in a trash can. We saw Chastinia Reeves in Indiana, a mother hidden in a freezer, a daughter missing, an Amber Alert that made her look like a victim, until the story changed and the focus turned back on her. We went to California with Tyler Witt, a teen girl and her older boyfriend, deciding that the only way to keep their illegal relationship alive was to kill the one person trying to protect her, her mother, Joanne, murdered as she slept. Across the ocean in the UK, we met Lorraine Thorpe, 15 years old, dragged through a world of addiction and violence, and yet still making choices that led her to become Britain's youngest female double murderer, her own father and a woman named Rosalind, both killed in savage, sustained attacks. Then we stepped into the age of social media with Sarah Grace Patrick, a teen girl in Georgia, allegedly shooting both her parents as her 6-year-old sister discovered their bodies, and then, according to prosecutors, reaching out to true crime creators online, asking them to cover the story of her parents' murders before she herself was charged. We saw another alleged family annihilation case with Julia Grace Egler, 2 parents dead, a scene that first looked like a home invasion until investigators began to believe it was staged, and the teen daughter herself was charged in connection. Then came the twins, Tasmia and Jasmia Whitehead, 2 daughters who didn't just argue with their mother, Nikki. They brutally killed her in a violent struggle, then lied about it, trying to blame a mystery intruder before finally admitting the truth and pleading guilty. We moved to pure overkill with Nakisha Waddell, 14 years old, a knife, 43 stab wounds, a mother dragged into the backyard and a hurried grave dug into the earth, proof that the violence went far, far beyond what was needed to take a life. And finally, we closed the case list with Gina Grant, a 14-year-old who killed her mother with a heavy candlestick, tried to burn the scene, served time, then almost reinvented herself as a Harvard student, only for the truth to resurface and shatter that new identity. 10 cases, different states, different countries, different methods, but the same core horror. The person responsible wasn't a masked stranger, it was the daughter. Patterns in the darkness. When you look at these stories side by side, certain patterns start to glare back at you. Older boyfriends and partners. Valessa Robinson, Tyler Witt, Gina Grant's accomplice. In all of these, there's an older male influence, a relationship that mixes obsession, rebellion, and control. Mothers become obstacles. The solution, in their warped logic, is elimination, overkill, and rage. Nakisha's 43 stab wounds, Nikki Whitehead's brutal, sustained attack, the torture of Rosalind in Lorianne Thorpe's case. These aren't clean, calculated executions. They are explosions of anger, yet still with enough control afterward to hide bodies, stage scenes, and lie. Staging and manipulation. Julia Grace Egler and the alleged fake home invasion. Gina Grant and the attempted arson and robbery setup. The twins' original "We found her like this" story. These daughters didn't just kill, they allegedly tried to direct the narrative afterward. Broken homes and chaotic upbringings, Lorraine's life around addiction and neglect, tension in the Whitehead household. Strained, high-conflict relationships in several of these cases. The backgrounds are messy, but as we've seen, messy doesn't automatically equal murder. Millions of kids grow up in chaos and don't kill. The chilling question of remorse. Carly's calm walk and that text, the apparent lack of emotion described in several cases. The comfort some of these girls seem to have with lying, hiding, or moving on. This is where the title of this video becomes more than just words. They showed no remorse. In case after case, what terrifies people isn't only the act, it's how some of these daughters behave before, during, and after. Cold, calculated, detached, or disturbingly composed in the aftermath. Real people, real victims. It's easy, when you hear 10 stories in a row, to let them blur into content. But we need to remember something. These are not characters. They are not movie roles. Vicki Robinson was a mother, not just the mum in the Denny's story. Joanne Witt was a real woman who went to police to protect her child. Nikki Whitehead was a single mum fighting to hold her life together. Donna Dolly Grant, Desmond Thorpe, Rosalind Hunt, Derek and Tyler, the parents in Julia's case. They all had birthdays, favorite songs, people who loved them, fears, dreams. They should be alive. Instead, their names end up in files, in autopsy reports, in court transcripts, and now in videos like this. That's why, on Crime Uncovered, we don't tell these stories to glorify killers. We tell them to remember the victims, to examine the warning signs, and to ask the questions most people are afraid to face. Where do you draw the line? After everything you've heard tonight, I want to ask you a few final questions. At 14 or 15, do you believe these girls fully understood the weight of what they were doing? Do you see them mostly as children shaped by abuse, neglect, and manipulation? or as dangerous individuals who made conscious, evil choices? Do you believe someone who kills a parent as a teen can ever truly be rehabilitated? Or is that line so final that there's no coming back, no matter how many years pass? Drop your thoughts below. I read your comments, and on cases like these, what you think, how you interpret what you've just heard matters. If you're still here, if you've made it all the way to this point in the video, you are exactly the kind of viewer Crime Uncovered is made for. You don't just want surface-level shock. You stay for the full story, the context, the patterns, the questions. If you haven't already, please take a second to like this video. It might feel like a small click, but it tells the platform is greater than people want deep, long-form true crime that treats these stories with seriousness and respect. It helps more people find this video. It helps these victims' names travel further. And it allows us to keep making high-effort, fully researched breakdowns like this one, instead of shallow, rushed content. So, like the video if you learned something or felt something tonight. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now if you haven't yet. Because the fact that you're here, at this hour, listening to stories this dark, tells me something important about you. You don't look away. In the final part, we'll close this out properly. A short, heavy reflection on what all of this means for families, for justice, and for the way we look at evil in someone so young. And then I'll tell you what's coming next on Crime Uncovered. We've spent hours together tonight, hours diving into the darkest corners of family life, where the people who should be safest became the most vulnerable. You've heard the stories of Carly, Valessa, Chastania, Tyler, Lorraine, Sarah, Julia, Tasmia, and Jasmia, Nakisha, and Gina. 10 daughters, 10 mothers and fathers whose lives were brutally cut short. And the question that echoes through every single one of these cases is not just how it happened, but why. Why did the bond of family shatter so completely? Why did love turn to such profound hatred? And how does a child, at such a tender age, cross a line that most adults can't even fathom? There are no easy answers. There are only the victims, whose stories deserve to be told with honesty and respect. And there are the lasting questions these cases leave behind, questions that force us to look closer at the hidden tensions in our own lives and the darkness that can sometimes lurk in the most unexpected places. If these stories have left you with more questions than answers, if they've made you think, if they've disturbed you in a way that demands deeper understanding, then you are part of the Crime Uncovered community. We don't shy away from the uncomfortable truths. We don't sugarcoat the horror. We dig deep, we research thoroughly, and we present these cases so that the victims are remembered and the patterns are understood. If you want more in-depth, long-form true crime documentaries like this one, where we take the time to explore the full story, make sure you are subscribed to Crime Uncovered. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. And if you haven't already, please like this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people, ensuring that the victims are not forgotten and the lessons, however grim, are not lost. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for facing these truths with us. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, the most terrifying stories are often the real ones. This is Crime Uncovered.